most people don't want to be contributing to the, horrors that are happening across the globe for our minor conveniences. But it's just that the information is so well hidden. It takes so much work, and people just don't have the mental energy to put, to do that work for themselves.
Have you joined the Spotify exodus? I mean, the CEO has just stepped down. There's a lot of people leaving. There's artists boycotting the platform and pulling their music. So where do you go if Spotify was where you accessed music and where you paid quite a large amount each year to consume the music you love? Well, in this episode, I meet an expert who knows all about this. She runs an Instagram account called Cut Off The Spigot, which begun as an account to kind of look at your alternatives to some of the big corporate platforms. And over the last few weeks, she's been digging in really, really deep with some brilliant research into all the different streaming alternatives to Spotify. She looks at which ones pay artists better, which ones don't have investments in the war machine, like Spotify's AI investments in war drones, not investments in AI, investments in drones that use AI, which if you watch this little clip, you will understand why that is so abhorrent.
Everyone is talking about military AI, but they're not talking about what military AI is exactly. So I'm going to explain it to you like you're 5. So an example of military AI is drones and vehicles that can navigate and target specific targets without any human input. So for example, you have these drones in the sky that are miles and miles and miles away from you. You can't see them. The naked eye cannot see these drones. That's how far up in the sky they are. But those drones can detect who you are. And if you are a target, it can kill you without any human input. That is a very dangerous weapon. You know what I mean? And that is the weapon that is being used in places like Lebanon and in Palestine. There is no one to be held accountable. And this is why we should all be worried.
That was a clip from Naily by Nature posted on her Instagram account. It's well worth going to watch the full thing. Also on this week's podcast, I am rejoined by Laura, aka Mynabirds, who protested Spotify, took her music down, and has led the charge. And she's had millions and millions of views on her videos saying why, as a pacifist, she didn't want to use Spotify anymore as a platform, but also why, as an artist, she'd fallen out of love with the platform quite a long time ago. Also, another artist on this week's show. This is the biggest amount of guests we've had on a Drown in Sound podcast, apart from a conference panel one we did a while ago. Kadhja Bonet is a brilliant musician. She's put out some fantastic records on Ninja Tune. And we have a conversation about why she has made a stand about Spotify, all the research that she did on her own back, which was all backed up by what Cut Off The Spigot discovered. So this is my conversation about the Spotify exodus and where you, as a music fan, can try and go. And we do reveal which platform is the one that we've all discovered seems to be the most ethically strong. Ethically, there doesn't seem any big red flags. Let's just leave it at that. This is the Drown in Sound podcast. I'm Sean Adams, and in this episode, we get deep into the Spotify exodus. Well, welcome to part 2 of Drown in Sound's podcast series about the Spotify exodus. I think today's guest, so that we can hear who you are and join the voice and introduce you how you'd like to be introduced. Could you introduce yourselves, please?
Yeah, so I am Alexa Speed. I am the person behind Cut Off The Spigot, which is a platform. Essentially, I go through and try to find alternatives to bad companies and do the research so you don't have to.
And I'm Kadhja Bonet. I make music, and that's me. At least I try to.
You make wonderful music. I've just been listening to your new EP. It's fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much.
Which is available on Bandcamp and not on Spotify. Could you tell me why you objected so much to Spotify that you went and did some very similar work to Alexa, put up some information about why you were leaving, how you were leaving, and where people should go? What was the breaking point for you?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, for years, I've been like asking labels I've been on, like, hey, like, I'm not really feeling Spotify. Like, can we try not to do this? And I'd always get the same, no, we have to be on Spotify. Spotify makes up like 40% of our revenue, blah, blah, blah. And so, but there's be all these new little things would come out about Spotify and the kind of things they're doing. They're like weird payola models where they'll like offer to promote with zero transparency your music in exchange for you giving up even more of your tiny share of royalty that they give you. And obviously very strange AI practices. And honestly, I didn't notice the first time Daniel Ek invested in Helsing like 4 years ago. He put like $100 and something million in like 4 years ago. And that just went over everybody's radar. Like nobody brought that up to me. And then this summer, when he put in another, was 600 million, I don't know if it was dollars or euros, 600 million euros. Yeah. I was like, okay, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that's it. Like, I'm pretty sure that's my line. And I went back to my label again because I had just spoken to them like 2 months before, like trying to convince them that maybe we should pull off of Spotify. Not maybe, that we should pull off of Spotify. And they're like, we really can't do that. And I was like, okay, that's a hard line for me. Would you be willing to like let me out of the deal? And they were really kind because they didn't have to let me out of the deal. I've signed a contract with them that they own the music I put out, and they were like, yeah, we'll do that. So they cut me loose early. But then when I started like thinking about pulling my music from Spotify or not giving them future music, because obviously the labels own the past music, I realized that it's not just Spotify and that like Spotify has done this very like, or Daniel Ek has done this very like public act of investing in this AI war tech firm. But all of the major streaming services are war profiteers. And at that point, I felt like it wasn't enough to just pull from Spotify. And I understood also that I was like killing my career basically, but that I was okay with that because it's like, okay, we know, Apple's complicit, in the least complicit in, all of the terror happening in the Congo. We know Deezer's owner, Len Blavatnik, has been had conversations leaked over WhatsApp with trying to silence pro-Palestinian protests on campuses because he's invested in bulldozing Palestine.
Also has some strange link to some TV station in Israel as well. And I guess we're going to get into some of these things, not all of which we can accurately and precisely find the information, because obviously transparency is not at a premium. But like you said, like when you like, it's not like all of the companies are directly buying arms and selling arms. Often it's the private equity companies behind them in those layers and layers and layers, which is what makes Cut Off The Spigot such a brilliant resource. And I know, Kadhja, you tried to do research and you put some really great resources into your Instagram carousels. Like, it's a lot to dig into though, isn't it? Did you find it quite overwhelming?
I mean, it like stopped everything else I was working on to just do research for several weeks on like trying to get to the bottom of it. And I felt like it was really important that I do that because at the time I hadn't found Cut Off The Spigot yet. And I didn't have anybody else to look to for that stuff. So I was like, well, somebody needs to be doing this work. Because I think most people don't want to be contributing to the, horrors that are happening across the globe for our minor conveniences. But it's just that the information is so well hidden. It takes so much work and people just don't have the mental energy to put, to do that work for themselves. And I'm convinced that people are good. And if they knew all these things, they would not accept these tiny privileges for such immense suffering for other people.
I agree 1,000,000%. And I think that we have reached a tipping point because I think for at least my entire life, you know that there's a little bit of bad that's happening, right? You buy a thing and you know that because of capitalism, someone's pocketing that money and maybe someone suffers as a result of the way the thing is made, an animal is hurt in testing, whatever it is, you know? And you think, oh, well, it's getting better, it's getting better. But I think what we've witnessed over the past few years is the peeling back of the layers to actually see the harm. And we think the harm is becoming so great that whole populations are suffering terribly. Animal populations, the whole planet is suffering in such a terrible way that, you know, it's sort of like no more, no more. And so I'm so grateful to be here with you, Alexa. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the deep research you provide, because for me it was very easy to say, okay, I'm done with Spotify, but now I have to look at everything. You know, it's like, all right, let's talk about Apple, let's talk about Amazon, let's talk about
YouTube.
you know, Deezer. Are there any good YouTube, are there any
Yeah.
good platforms? Help us know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's really why I started Cut Off the Spigot, is because in even my own life, I wanted to quit Amazon and to just try to do that. I had all sorts of subscriptions, you know, that made it super easy to manage my household, but also I felt bad every time I was using it. And but then, you know, I didn't want to give my money to another bad company. And to what you guys were saying, I mean, they obfuscate it, you know, the ownership, what they're truly doing. And I think what a lot of consumers are realizing is that, yeah, maybe there was always a little bit of bad, but companies are now essentially just trying to like squeeze every little bit of profit they can out of the consumer. So even if you're getting that convenience, you're getting kind of screwed in another way, whether it's like maybe, you know, subscription prices increasing much more frequently, things like that. But it's exhausting to kind of live in this economy when you're just trying to, you know, avoid getting screwed over in your day-to-day life. And so to me, like, the research is definitely intense and it's definitely time intensive, but it is something that I'm so happy I'm doing and being able to share with people, because I also agree. I think a lot of people really don't want to be putting their money towards companies that are actively harming people or harming workers or harming artists. And there's a lot of different ways of harm. But really, they just don't have the time or energy to go find these things. You know, like I talked to my sister, she's a single mom with 2 kids, and she doesn't have time to research like all these alternatives, but she really wants to. And so I think being able to put the information out there and help people, you know, choose differently is something really awesome.
It's exactly what the internet was built for. I mean, that was meant to be the utopian vision when people first got online, was that the knowledge and the information would be free. And I think it's worth putting into context, your account isn't just an account that's researching Spotify. In fact, this feels like a little bit of a kind of step off of what you normally do. Do you want to talk about how you first started the account and the sorts of things you usually cover?
So I started the account in April of this year, and I basically quit my job. I was incredibly burnt out, and um, I wanted to start my own business. And I had kind of one idea, and then I was just there was this article that was the straw on the camel's back, where Amazon was saying how they would essentially, like, you couldn't opt out of them scanning children interactions with Amazon Alexa. So like if you have an Amazon Alexa in your home and your kids are talking to it and interacting with it, you can't opt out of that data being used to then train their AI model, which I don't know what it was, but it was just like they're acting with such impunity, and I was so angry. And I was just like, I'm sick of this shit. Like I can't do this anymore. And you know, I was in that position where I was kind of trying to figure out what my next move was. And so I was like, I can do this. I'll do the research. Like even if I just do it for me and then I know and no one else pays attention to it, then at least I feel better. But I think I mean, I've seen really explosive growth in my accounts and profiles and things like that. And I think that speaks to people wanting this information and wanting to find alternatives. And so Yeah, and started from just being frustrated and wanting something different.
And what sort of companies have you looked into, and how different was that to looking into streaming services?
Yeah, so originally, it started kind of figuring out alternatives to Amazon and then Target as we started boycotting them across the US. And then Walmart's always been a bad company, so throw that in there too. But the reason why I started with those is because I think with the landscape of at least the US economy, it's really hard to find those day-to-day things without going to Amazon, Walmart, Target. And so a lot of my categories are more focused on things like that. Like I did like a cleaning supply series where I did like 7 videos in 7 days. So a lot of times it's more kind of day to day things like that. But you know, I'm willing to tackle any category and take a look at it and see what those good options are. And with Spotify and looking at Spotify alternatives, it basically was a very similar process. I look at ownership, I look at whether the company has spent money on lobbying in the US, and then I also look at their diversity policy, if they have one, if they've taken it down. And that's kind
Yeah,
of where
because
I
that's
start.
something since Trump, people are taking down their diversity policies, aren't they?
Yeah. So with like Trump's executive orders earlier this year against like diversity and DEI, a lot of companies pulled back their policies. Like Google is a great example, where they've pulled back a lot of their DEI support and actually have cut funding for any nonprofits that they previously gave donations to that have it's like diversity, equity, inclusion. I think it's racism and then women, like any of those terms in their mission statements, they won't give money to anymore, which also includes the National Network to End Domestic Violence. So, I mean, that's kind of insane. But yeah, like diversity is definitely a big thing. And then, when I look at a category like music platforms, I then look into, okay, like what are the subscription options? What does the catalog look like? What are the features? Things like that that are all relevant for.
How much do artists get paid, I think, is one of the harder
Yes,
ones to
that
dig
is the
into
huge one.
because, and
Yeah,
then I
that was the
think,
first thing I looked at.
because I think as an outsider, the music industry might look quite strange. I don't know whether you are in it, music industry, whether you have worked in music before, because I think that the thing that, as someone that puts records out, manages artists, like I just see them all as the same access to the same database with a different interface now. And I think for the average consumer, they go, oh, Spotify's got Discover Weekly and Wrapped and all these things. And I noticed last year a lot of people kind of felt shamed if they shared their Spotify Wrapped. There was like a conscious, I'm sharing this, but I know I should be on a different streaming platform kind of vibe. Whereas 2 or 3 years ago, I think people were quite happy to brag about their Spotify numbers. And that's been quite a big shift definitely within the music nerd circles. And I think that's permeating people's family members, asking them which service should we be using. And I think those shifts are happening probably a lot quicker. We can't know if the reason Daniel Ek has stepped down as CEO is at all related, but I'm assuming they have a quarterly shareholders document coming up.
Can we please talk about that for a minute? I can't believe that they like quietly he came out and was like, dear friends and family and countrymen, I am now going to step down and hand the reins over to 2 new CEOs, which I think was totally a face-saving effort. And of course, talk about obfuscating things. It's like, well, now there's not one face. You can't just say, well, Daniel X the problem. Now there's 2 people. So who do you point the finger at? I'm also curious, as you talk further about the DSPs and how you evaluated them, if you had any environmental evaluation as well. I know that's kind of hard to look at. You can kind of look at AI policies to say, well, we know AI is bad for the environment, and I know that plays some factor, but I don't know how else you can evaluate them.
Yeah, I think environmental factors across any category are something that I look at, but it is often hard to find like actual audits or reporting that certifies that these people are actually doing what they blast all over their corporate websites. And I've worked in corporate America. I have, on marketing teams where it's like, yeah, we have all these initiatives. And then internally, no one is actually seeing them through or making sure that they actually happen. So I, and then on top of that, it's just hard in terms of like, yeah, like environmental certifications and things like that. So it's something that like I touch on a lot, but I don't necessarily say, oh, this company is definitely environmentally good or environmentally bad, because I think there's so many different ways you can look at it. All that to be said, I do think AI, like using AI and energy consumption is a huge issue. So not only from the overall environmental impact, but even on a day-to-day consumer basis. So we're seeing energy prices go up significantly across the US because of these data centers. A Carnegie Mellon report actually found that in Northern and Central Virginia, where they're building a lot of data centers, electricity prices are expected to rise by up to 25% by 2030, which I would assume would actually be even higher. So there is a huge, concern regarding AI energy consumption and things like that. But I think for me, it's hard to figure out how to exactly quantify that and compare from company to company, and also actually find like the data and resources on how much they're actually consuming.
Next month, hopefully, I'm publishing some work that In Place of War have been doing, and they've got a brilliant researcher who's been really digging into it. The biggest challenge is most of them use AWS, so that's Amazon's hosting. There are some Amazon servers that are actually in renewable areas, but you can't really pick where the data's hosted, and often you're accessing a mirror server. Like, I'm not going to bore people with how the internet works, but like often you're accessing like the local server rather than the international one. Sometimes you're accessing a cached file rather than, so if you play a song several times, it probably keeps a temporary version on your machine, so it's not doing as much work. If you download a song, if you listen to it less than 30 times, apparently that's not good. So there's loads and loads of data which this amazing organization called In Place of War have done loads of research in. So we're hoping to co-publish that next month, but it's really difficult. And similarly, I looked into like podcast hosting. It's really unclear. Some people say they've got carbon neutral programs or planning to be carbon neutral by 2030 and those kinds of things. I looked into web hosting. We use a company called Ghost. They say they do things a certain way, but I don't really know how we would check. It's not something I can necessarily audit them on. And then you start to look at the rest of the food chain of music. It's like so many of the bits, like the energy use of vinyl, like which contains petroleum, as that's the P in the PVC, and the heavy metals and all the other bits. So there's a lot of complexity, and the challenge of analyzing the environmental impact of the music industry in general is something that people get quite quiet about. And I did a panel about this at a conference a few months ago, and my reason why I think Spotify is one of the worst is because of Joe Rogan, because he has some of the most climate misinformation of any podcast at scale, and it's shifted narratives in ways that almost no one else can. And if you listen to someone like Renee DeResta, who's written a couple of really good books on disinformation, like she sees those people at scale as being the biggest problem. Media Matters did a bit of a breakdown on some of the climate misinformation that Joe Rogan put out. It's worth reading if anyone's interested in that. But I would say giving $450 million to Joe Rogan is probably quite a good sign that you're not prioritizing the planet over profit. I'm getting some clicking from Laura.
That was me just
Yeah.
giving you some finger snaps.
I'm really curious, Alexa, as someone who started doing this research, what thing shocked you the most that you didn't expect when you started digging into the streaming companies?
Yeah, so I would say not necessarily what shocked me the most, but what angered me the most was Deezer. And Kadhja touched on it, but basically, if you're not aware, Deezer is majority owned by Access Industries, which is an investment firm that is founded by Len Blavatnik. In spring 2024, Len Blavatnik and other billionaires joined this WhatsApp group to basically sway public opinion to be more pro-Israel. And they were like, figuring out ideas and ways to do that. In spring 2024, this was when across the US there were tons of college campus protests against the war in Israel, against the war in Gaza, and essentially against US involvement in supporting Israel and bombing Gaza. So while all these college campus protests were going on, essentially the NYPD entered Columbia's campus to arrest protesters in a big escalation. And so this billionaire WhatsApp group with Len Blavatnik and others basically messaged Mayor Eric Adams of New York City and said, hey, how can we help you to get back on NYPD's campus? This is all allegedly. But allegedly, they were, offering to give the NYPD their own private investigators. They were talking about how to basically lobby the Columbia president to have, them ask the NYPD back onto the campus and things like that. So there was this billionaire group that was directly involved with America's largest city's police force entering a local campus to basically arrest protesters against a genocide. And to me, like, that's really insane, right? Like, billionaires are infiltrating local police forces to get protesters arrested. And it's almost like conspiracy theory levels, but it's not. It's real. They have this level of influence, and it's billionaires that I'm sure most of us have never even heard of. I didn't know really who Len Blavatnik was before I started doing this research.
His Wikipedia is quite spicy. He's also sanctioned by Ukraine. There's like a protest with the Tate in London to try and get him removed from the board. Sorry, Kadhja.
No, I was just, yeah, that Wikipedia is wild. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also like, allegations that he may have started coordinating with Russia back in like 2016. There's a lot going on with Len Blavatnik. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like Deezer and Len Blavatnik and his billionaire WhatsApp group are really emblematic of the wealth inequality and the power that is concentrated at the top and what we have to fight against. Like, I don't want a billionaire telling any police force what to do or coordinating them or offering their own resources of private investigators to supplement what they're already doing.
Isn't there a name for that?
Like fascism, oligarchy, authoritarianism. I don't know. It's all
right. And why are they involved in music? Like, how is that? The integration there is insane. And as a musician, you're like, what? Absolutely not. And especially as a person who's written protest music my entire career, like, there's no fucking way I want to be
And it's on every, yeah. So we're just saying it on every level of the music industry, whether it's streaming or Live Nation or whether it's music festivals, like there's so much embedded into the music industry that's why it made, like, I was just like, okay, that if it's career suicide, it's career suicide, because all of these levels of the music industry are rotten. So like we need to cut them out.
I mean, yeah, you look at like Ticketmaster and Live Nation, which have a monopoly, and people complain about high ticket prices all the time. It's because of consolidation. It's because of monopoly. Like,
absolutely. And you have something like South by Southwest, which used to be a music discovery series. It was like such a great platform. It's how I got started, and now they're dumping where they were, right? Dumping money into arms. And it's like, how did that happen? Well, it's because they were sold and sold and sold. And then people who own them are billionaires who are dumping their money into war, because war is, as Sean said last time we talked, war is profitable.
The first time we met was at South by Southwest when you were playing with a member of Q and Not You, weren't you?
Yeah.
From the DC hardcore scene. Your set was definitely not a hardcore set from what I remember.
No, it was definitely some indie twee shit.
In the times before Penske, did the Penske media organization own South by Southwest back then? I don't know if they did,
No,
because
I don't
that's
think so.
the same Penske that sponsors the Formula One team that stood on the front on the White House lawn with Trump, wasn't it, recently? The bizarreness, like, and Rolling Stone is,
Well,
he
and
owns Rolling
also if
Stone,
you
which
want
is
to,
meant to be political, and
right, and if you also want to talk about Penske, what I say Penske in the
Penske,
US.
okay.
I don't know how, right? But they also their trucks are rented by ICE agents who show up in these Penske trucks and show up at Home Depots pretending to be workers, and then they go out and just like kidnap a bunch of people. So it's all tied together.
I think that also all ties back to wealth inequality, right? Because the basically you have all of these billionaires and, you know, very, very multimillionaire rich people who are looking for more and more places to invest their money, and because they have more and more and more of it and they want it to keep growing. And so I think that's why you see such a rise of and domination of private equity in the US. Like, I've looked into yarn and fabric companies, and it's surprising how many yarn companies are actually owned by private equity. And it's, it's just kind of like another thing they can add to their portfolio and say they're diversified or things like that. But as you keep having more and more of this wealth concentration on the top, you're going to have all of these, music companies that are turning around that money and putting into something completely different that doesn't make sense, like war profiteering, because they need another place to invest it. And war is really hot right now. And so it's, yeah, it's very, very frustrating.
Do you know that the military is, I think it's the fourth or fifth, if it was a country, the military would be the fifth biggest emitter of carbon in the world. There's a website called the waronclimate.org, which has got scientists putting together information. And I think the US military's output is the same as all of Sweden. Like, just the military in America's output is the same as the entire country of Sweden. There's some shocking data in amongst that. And I think it's worth remembering that the emissions of a streaming platform are going to be dwarfed by a few hours of fighter jets and tanks and bombs and everything else, which the same people are making money from. You actually made me wonder when you were talking about people investing in yarn. They often make the argument, oh, it's only like 5% of our business that's in military and only 3% of our business is in fossil fuel. And I wonder what percentage of that food chain of companies, and if those companies then don't have more ethical policies, that then means that they're still using fossil fuel, which means they're still kind of upholding these DEI policies or keeping people on the lowest possible wages so that kind of inequalities kind of stagnates. And it's, yeah, if you can then control so many different parts of the market and the supply chain as well as the kind of shop front, it's, yeah, I think there's a lot more than just these companies are bad because they are funding and profiting from war.
Hi there, it's Emma here. I'm gate crashing the podcast to quickly tell you about the Drowned in Sound newsletter. Every Wednesday, I invite myself into your inbox, with permission, of course, to share opinion writing and resources, tell you about cool things that you should be involved in within the world of music, activism, etc. I also bring track of the week and a little bit of hopeful news for you, because we all know that the news cycle can be grim at the best of times. Drowned in Sound newsletter every Wednesday in your inbox. Sign up now.
I was just going to say, like, what's the bits that have been hardest to clarify in terms of some of the companies? And then, like, I'm not saying what did you leave out, because for obvious reasons you can't tell me that. But was there areas that you tried to look into that you couldn't find the detail?
Yeah, so just to touch on audience trust for a second, because I think that is really important. Um, I don't think Cut Off the Spigot survives if I don't have audience trust, because if you don't trust me, why are you listening to me, And so it is paramount to me to maintain and even grow that audience trust. And that's why, like, I don't accept any advertising or post sponsorships from any of the businesses that I review, or really any businesses at all, except with the exception I might do something with a local business at some point in the future. I have not yet. But like, I don't want to create that profit incentive to skew my reporting. And I think that is something that, like, I talked to a lot of people when I started this, and they're like, oh, so you're going to set up affiliate links and like, da 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 da. I hope you're getting some kickbacks. And I'm like, no, I'm not, because that's like, I can't make money that way because it's just going to skew everything I do. So that is really important to me. In terms of like what information I include or don't include, I 100% make anything that I'm writing or claiming is backed up by a source, and I link it within like my Substack articles. So I'm very clear and explicit about that. One thing that always gets a little bit murky sometimes is company ownership structure, but that's something where if I'm unsure, I will include like all the information I have and make a note saying like, this is what I think it is, like based on all this information, but I don't know 100% for sure. Um, and then just in general, like if there are any things I missed or anything like that, I definitely, so far, knock on wood, there's been nothing major, but if there is anything I feel like I need to update, I just go back and then I clearly mark like updated and things like that, or make another video if I needed to, because, I'm not trying to say I was right the whole time. I own up to my mistakes. And then, yeah, just trying to make sure, like, if I do find anything, I generally try to include it. I don't try to like gatekeep or say, oh, maybe this isn't relevant, people won't care about this, because it's funny. Like I found, posting my videos, I will post on some category that I'm like, oh, nobody cares about this aspect. And then everybody comments about it. So I'm like, I don't know what could be relevant for other people or what they really care about. So I try to make sure that I'm incorporating anything I find.
Kadhja and Laura, when you saw the videos, was there anything you're like, oh my God, I've not heard anyone talk about that? Or was there anything where you're like, I'm so glad that this bit of information that I've been sitting on, like someone's actually found the evidence of it?
Yeah, for me, I was glad to see that the research that I had done had lined up with what Alexa had done independently. That made me feel like confident in myself that I can handle this work. And just glad that I didn't mess up and give information that I would regret. But the other thing is that, like, if we successfully move people off of these platforms to other platforms, and then those platforms get bought, we have to be prepared to abandon those platforms too. Like, this is not a forever information thing. This is for right now. And this is like this is a lifestyle of constantly informing yourself and being willing to take the steps to continuously divest from harmful systems. So, like right now, I know Cut Off The Spigot and myself and others have been saying, if you're going to go for a streamer, we're recommending Qobuz. However, if that gets bought and we don't trust it, we're off that thing, like, and we're on to the next. And we're just going to keep on reshaping it, because I think we all know that we have given all of these billionaires their power, like, because we just, we'll take what they offer and we don't question it. We are putting value in their companies. So we also have the obligation to do the research and remove the value with ourselves.
Yeah, their company value is based on the number of users they've got. And there's like, I've forgotten what the unit is they can measure it in. I don't know if anyone knows. But like, I remember when we did a brief deal with Drown in Sound years ago. And like, we looked up like mobile phone companies, and like they work out it's worth about £100 per each new customer they get, because people are going to stay with them for like 2 to 3 years, if not longer. And so they have a customer acquisition that's just off the charts, and which means as advertisers, they can afford to spend loads per new customer they generate. And those numbers are pretty shocking when you start to look at how much profit they make from each person, because like with music streaming, there's no cost of creating the product. They create a platform so you can access it, and then maybe have an editorial team that picks what goes to the fore. The biggest department in Spotify has always been their advertising sales team, because they've not outsourced it to another company because they think they can make more money. But I don't remember the last time anyone in the music industry was like, oh great, we can take out some adverts on Spotify to promote our music, because the return on investment is just not there. It's just like a completely broken model. So in terms of the information that's out in the world right now, why is it that Qobuz is one of the best ones? Do you want to start on that, Kadhja?
For me, I mean, it's just that I could not find dirt on it. And that was just like the first thing. It's like I tried my best to be like, who owns this and what are they up to? And I couldn't find it. And that doesn't mean that they're up to good stuff. It might just be that they're very covert in operation. But for now, that's what it looks like. And this brings me to one thing I wanted to clear up earlier, because I think there's this kind of misconception about how streaming income works, that people think that like Spotify pays less. And in reality, all streamers pay out at the same rate, but it's just because so many more people are using Spotify that rate gets cut up and cut up and cut up. So when people are at, maybe they're using Spotify and it's just streaming in the background all day, or there's millions of bots using Spotify and it's flooded with all of this kind of mess, and that all gets diluted more and more and more. So if all that same stuff were to end up on Qobuz, it would be the same for artists. So it's not that they're like necessarily paying better. It's just that they're used less right now. And that means a better ratio for artists. That doesn't mean more money, because they have less subscribers, so they have less pool. But that's why I think the end game for me is not using streamers at all. Some streamers came about because people wanted like an alternative to piracy. But I think the best alternative is for people to invest in local arts and invest in their community and support art because they love art, or to have, co-op systems where we're all supporting each other. But anyway.
I want to second what you said, Kadhja, about keep holding whatever platform we're recommending now, holding their feet to the fire over time and saying, we expect you to stay true to your good vision right now and your good practices. And for Qobuz, the same thing was what I found. I had my label reach out to various DSPs to ask them questions. They got back very quickly. And I was asking them about their AI policies, and that was a little like loosey-goosey. They didn't seem to have like a specific AI policy, other than the fact that the CEO was like, fuck AI, if you find me loving an AI band, somebody shoot me, was basically what he said. And it's not necessarily yet, and Alexa, you can please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that they're not necessarily flagging AI in any way or rejecting AI, because I think even for musicians, that line is gray, right? It's like, where is AI used as a tool in which maybe you're even using your own music? I mean, I will say, to me, it's always, I'm not interested in that, because an AI model is always trained off of other music. So it's always going to be profiting off the backs of unpaid labor. But yeah, I think that for that reason, Qobuz is interesting to me. It does seem to be a platform run by music lovers. So, and that's definitely not the case for any of the other music platforms. They are not, that I've seen, run by music lovers. And who knows, maybe there's some co-op model in the future that's like made by musicians, for actual fans of music, that actually pays people for their labor because they care about the content and the labor that goes into making it.
And just to touch on that, there are definitely co-op models out there. They are quite small right now. I will have a post in the future highlighting some of those. So there is some hope. But yeah, I mean, I think Qobuz is my favorite, kind of similar to what Kadhja said. I couldn't find anything like, any major red flags or anything. It seemed to be like a pretty straightforward company. And I completely agree. Like, once you are considered good and, maybe people switch to you, that doesn't mean you get to rest on your laurels. It just means that you need to maintain that. Otherwise, we're off to the next one. And, even if there isn't another major streaming platform, maybe it is then everybody switches to the co-ops at that point or something. But like, we can't keep putting our money.
I keep thinking of this example as we're talking, which is that at one point, Whole Foods was a local grocer from Austin, Texas, that was committed to, you know, great organic local food. And now it's owned by Jeff Bezos. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Whole Foods is such a great example of like, I'm not going to shop there anymore, but it started nice. I wanted to answer Laura's question on the AI stuff for Qobuz. So, yes, in terms of Qobuz's AI policy, I'm not sure they have like an official one yet, but from my understanding, and I'm not necessarily an expert in this specifically, but to your point, Laura, about, utilizing AI as a tool, like it may be incorporated into, pieces or parts of the music, but not a whole AI creation. And I think, as people upload onto these platforms and things like that, like it can be hard to figure out what that line is and like does that require human review and things like that. So I think even like AI detection can be really hard and understanding, you don't want things to get flagged necessarily that aren't, but and things to slip through. So I think that's something it seems like they're interested and want to figure it out. I don't know if they have yet. But I do think in general it is very difficult. But that being said, I completely agree. I think AI generated music is just something I have no interest in. Even if I'm listening to like I wanted to listen to hold music, I want, someone actually playing the sax or something at some point. And so and yeah, if it is AI generated, it is just built off of existing musicians' work and it's not original. So
yeah, even if you're sourcing, even if I were to go to an AI platform, I can't even remember any of the names and throw my own music in and say, hey, write me a Mynabirds song. It's not just pulling from my catalog. It's pulling from the AI model that it has trained on, which is every other song that it's trained on, So it's automatically profiting off of labor that is not mine. So
yeah,
I'm
exactly.
fundamentally opposed to it, period.
I mean, there are some things which are classed as AI, which aren't actually AI. It's just a fancy way of saying algorithm, because not everything is going through a massive large language model type of system. Like things like there's a tool that I can use to tidy up the audio on this podcast, and that's not going through anything other than it's got the frequencies it knows it should have and the frequencies it knows it shouldn't. It's not really AI. We're just branding lots of things as AI that really isn't. Like auto-tune is technically a form of AI. There was a really interesting episode of the Verge podcast where they went a little bit into that, and how it's sort of used in some of the theories of how some of the AI technology works, but so is the theremin. Like we needed theremin technology in order to do certain things. So
Generative versus non-generative AI. Yeah, I think we should definitely make a distinction when we're talking about AI, that we're talking about generative AI. Yeah, what were you going to say, Alexa? I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say the exact same thing. Like, I think there's AI, which is kind of everything before Chat GPT exploded when they were describing AI, and then Chat GPT and after anything that is utilizing a large language model or has kind of like a chat bot, chat feature, that type of thing. That is generally generative AI, and generative AI is the one that is actually like the huge energy consumption that is, using these large language models to scan, artists' work, things like that. So that's the real problem AI, whereas a sort of regular AI, to your point, is more just like an algorithm.
like a DJ on a streaming platform.
Yeah, I do think we still have to be careful even with things like tools that we're using that are non-generative AI tools, because you have to like read the terms and conditions and know what you're using, because a lot of times they're training on what you're uploading to use, and then like all of a sudden you've given away rights to your voice to some random program because you wanted to clean up audio. Like we still have to like do the work of reading, and it's exhausting. But yeah, and I think the other problem that generative AI has like raised for me is kind of like the ultimate form of appropriation of like we are going to extract as much of we can out of this demographics work and then repackage it, remove all the soul, all the resistance from it, any of the intentional messaging from it, and sell it for much cheaper than that person could ever make it for. And that's crazy. It's crazy because now you've created a product that has no purpose. It has no human purpose. It can't say no to you. It can't say these are the values that I stand for. It's just capitalism. It's just money.
No, I think that's so true. I mean, you see it like with I think ChatGPT just launched like a social media platform or something, and it has like AI generated users or content and all this stuff. And it's just kind of like, what is the point? Like social media has changed so much, but originally it was, trying to connect with your friends or connect with other people or learn about things in your community. And now it's like AI slop for us all to consume. Like, what is the point of that? I have better things to do in my day.
To switch from the billionaires that might be about to go bankrupt from putting all their money into AI to the DEI side of what you've been finding in your research, because in the conversation Laura and I had last time, we didn't really touch on that. And I think that, I guess there's two things. There's one, people that are being compliant to the Trump regime. Two, companies run by people that are already in the same headspace. And I guess the third part is people that put loads of money into the Trump inauguration and kind of like supporting that. I mean, obviously there's other awful world leaders around the world that I'm sure some of the platforms may have also donated to, and it's not really something we've dug into. But when you started looking into that, I'm guessing some of those policies and the kind of records of the companies are a bit more easier to find. Is that the case?
I think diversity is the one that is most based on sort of what they're saying on their corporate website, because it's not like there's like a database I can search to figure out whether these companies have a diversity policy. So it's one of those things where I kind of evaluated each one a little bit individually. Like if a company actually supports diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, sometimes they'll call it inclusion to kind of get away from the Trump stuff, but then they have like one of the signs that I think a company takes DEI seriously is when they have employee resource groups, which will be, organized by, kind of each different flavor of diversity. And so a lot of times people will have like all of that and I would probably consider like a DEI program, but they list it under inclusion. And I think that's okay. Like, yeah, you renamed it and that's kind of annoying, but like if that's gonna, I don't know, like that gets into kind of a wishy-washy thing. But if you're actually doing the right things, I think that's what's more important than like the name you put on your website. And so like even like Apple, for example, has said, like we're maintaining DEI despite what Trump says, but if there's more executive orders or court orders or things like that, then they may need to change things. But it's something that I kind of look into for each one and see, what they're actually trying to say. Are they including it at all? And then another side of that is, did they actually just straight up pull all of their diversity policies when Trump's executive orders came out? And for me, that's like a no, because then you totally folded and just caved to, what he was saying. And
Or like Spotify, do you host Andrew Tate courses in how to abuse women, which was a kind of thing that we got involved in earlier this year, which I think 150,000 people signed a petition before they started to pull some of those awful masterclasses that were kind of just sitting there like an hour and a half, like learning how to do coercive control or something. It was apps. And like Apple, for instance, hosts lots of podcasts, which I don't think fit within the policies that Apple suggests they have. Like Tommy Robinson, the far right agitator from the UK, real name Stephen Laxley Lennon, who's about to go to Israel. to see the right kind of Jews from the video he talked about yesterday, which was just to show his anti-Semitism coming to the fore. And I think you can see within some of these companies, like one of the things you also touched on was podcasting, because I guess with Spotify, if you're going to offboard, where do you go? And like that's a whole, like we probably need another 15 minutes to go through that. We won't go into too much detail, but like there's a lot of bizarre companies involved there. Like audiobooks was one of the other things. Like that's something that people use Spotify for. Like some of the options there again, there's Amazon, so Audible and some other options. I guess what I'm kind of getting at is that sometimes just the policy they have for their staff might not be the same as what they do as an organization. And I think that's probably something really key that we can all see as users and fans.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think like what I tried to do is when I'm researching is look kind of first at do they have that corporate DEI policy for their employees. But I actually was starting to research TV, movie, and streaming platforms, and like some of those platforms do have diversity content programs. So like that's great because especially in like TV, movies, film, there's like barely even women's perspectives and women-led stories, let alone like any other type of diversity. So I think those things are really important, definitely.
The thing that makes me fucking crazy is that I think a lot of these platforms would defend what they're presenting and allowing to appear on the platforms as free speech and saying, well, we have a diversity of customers and we need to serve all of our customers. And you have this horrific line between free speech and hate speech that is just being trampled because it makes money. And so we have really violent speech and harmful speech that is being allowed, especially by these DSPs and by providers of content, film, books, etc., because it makes money. And, you know, just because it makes money doesn't make it good.
No, totally, 100%.
I had a bunch of other questions here, but you guys have been doing the research yourself as musicians. Is there anything you wanted to ask?
We touched on, well, it's two things. One, I wanted to clarify because we talked about how important it is to like give accurate information. And I've seen it floating around a little bit, some misinformation about Daniel X step down. I was using air quotes for anybody who can't see, because I think that, well, I read the post that Daniel Ek published to Spotify's like, you know, blog about what they're doing. And he's actually taking a more hands-on role. So while if you just see the title step down, you'll be like, oh, okay, he's distancing himself because people don't like the, you know, investments he's made or whatever. You know, he still has the same ownership. He's still like the same stakeholder ownership. And he's actually in a more hands-on position where he says now he's going to be really shaping the policies, and especially in terms of how AI is used on the platform. So I don't think it's any better for anyone what Daniel Ek is doing now with Spotify. I wanted to clear that up. And then the other thing I wanted to say is because we touched on co-ops, and there are two co-ops that I've been communicating with, and I'm going to be putting music on in the future, which is Subvert and Resonate, and I think they're doing really interesting things, and I think we should all be looking into like co-op models, especially for artists right now. And Subvert is more of a like Bandcamp type of thing, but the 70% of the sales go directly to the artist, and the 30% remaining gets pooled in the like co-op pool and redivided amongst the members. And Resonate is more of a streaming model.
Oh, I was just going to ask you really quickly. So I signed up to be one of the founding members of Subvert. Did you also do that?
They just
as
had a
well?
meeting here.
And are they still allowing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're an artist, I was just going to take a real quick second and say, you know, check it out because you can sign up to be one of the founding members still and have a say in how that platform is created going forward.
He had a little meeting here in Toronto a couple of weeks ago that I was lucky enough to be able to go to, and I think they're doing really cool stuff. And then there's Resonate, which is also a co-op, but it's more of a streaming model, not but it's a stream to buy. It's interesting as well.
I covered Resonate. They I did hear from like from people who were trying it out, that it seemed closed or something. So I wasn't sure the exact status of Resonate right now. Um, but yeah, it's basically a pay to stream model where I think if you play a song 9 times, you own it. Otherwise, you like pay per stream. So it's something where if you have artists that you love that you listen to all the time, like essentially you'll pretty quickly stream it enough times to just own it, and then you won't have to pay again. But if you are trying like a lot of tons of new music, it might be a little bit more expensive because you're paying for each stream.
Joys of trying to make money from music. It's so complicated, and it shouldn't be, because if you're a music fan, you should just be able to go, okay, whereabouts can I support the artist I like and how can I do it? Like, I've found it quite strange with Bandcamp, people buying MP3s and they don't really need the file. They just want to support the artist, which feels like we should be able to make something better to create something they actually
Yeah.
want to own. And that's the big challenge.
Kadhja and I were talking on the side, and I sent this text that I basically said, I think that we have the ability to envision and create a world in which music and art and dancing is just part of the fabric of our society, and artists are compensated because of that inherent value that you provide to society. And it doesn't have to be through money, but that's the post-capitalism world that we're working to smash our way into anyway.
No, totally. I mean, I don't have the exact study in front of me, but they have found that dancing, it can be just as effective as antidepressants for depression. Like if you just consistently dance and move your body. And I think like music and dancing and joy is so much more of what we need in this world, and being able to do that in a way where artists are valued for it and compensated for it is the goal. But yeah, we just got to get there.
And I think that it's so crazy. There's so often where I'll find these people who are so much better at making music than most professional musicians. And it just reminds me that everybody is supposed to do these things. Like everybody is supposed to have music and dance and art and crafts in their life. It's just part of like being healthy. I think we're all creative people. And then we've, because of capitalism, we've created this system where like, if you want to be able to do it, you have to try and make a living at it because there's just not enough time in the day. And it's wild.
Yes.
On that note, we've been talking for an hour and 2 minutes. I feel like we could probably do a kind of Joe Rogan length episode of this podcast, but I'm conscious and precious of your time. Is there anything else you guys want to add that people should know, things they should think about and consider before? Like, I quite like the idea that maybe a message for someone that's still using Spotify, that's got to this far in this podcast and hasn't thought about leaving, might not be that urgent and important, but like, what are some of the things that you guys want to just add before we walk out the door?
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what I wanted to add. So, basically, to just kind of answer that question, I try not to tell people exactly where they should shop, or, you have to shop here, you're bad, and, shame them if they shop at whatever company, because I don't think that's the way to get a lot more people involved. I think instead it's saying, hey, are you interested? Here are some alternatives. See what might work for you. Try some out. See, like, if you could replace some things with maybe some different alternatives. And so I'm not gonna ever say like, don't you absolutely can't, shop or use this music platform or things like that. And I think people talk a lot about boycotts and whether or not they work and things like that. And I think you can have that debate all day. But what really matters is how you feel when you are using that product or service or buying that thing. Because if you feel shitty every time you use Spotify because you've been listening to everything we're saying, and you're like, I know they don't pay artists. I know they're, taking the profits and funding war through their now former CEO, I guess. And all of these different things. And if you listen to that and then you go and use Spotify and you feel kind of bad about it, you feel kind of icky, you're like, I don't really want to use this anymore. But I don't have the time or whatever to switch. Make the time, and it only really takes maybe 10 or 15 minutes. to switch over your and transfer your playlists and your favorites and all that. But that's 10 or 15 minutes you spend upfront for the next, however many long months of actually feeling good when you're using your music streaming service. Or maybe you find, a different alternative. You buy CDs and vinyl again or something. But whatever way you're doing it, if you feel good while you're doing it, that contributes to your day-to-day happiness. Like, I can just say from quitting Amazon, like, and not feeling like I was trapped by that company anymore and that I had to only shop there because I didn't know where else to go and things like that. Like, not shopping there anymore, I don't have that cognitive dissonance. I don't have that icky feeling. I just feel good. And I think like you can debate and talk about all the different reasons in the world why things are good or bad, but I think if you just listen to yourself and say, do I feel good about this or not? And then make a decision based on that, you're likely going to feel better in the end.
I think that partially the main thing that we are talking about here is a movement back to community and back to mutual aid. And I think it's very easy to feel overwhelmed right now because there are a lot of directives and a lot of systems that are being put on us from above, right? And it's hard to know what to do as a small individual person. But I just want to, reiterate what Jane Goodall said, which was that we all have a place. We all have power individually to change our world, and acting locally will result in a global change. And that includes the ways in which we interact with and consume music. And so as a musician, that gives me a lot of hope because I'm like, all right, I'm going to go buy Kadhja's new record directly from her at her show. And I'm going to go get to enjoy that music live in person. And also we will share in community in that way. And that is the most wonderful thing that I think we can be involved in right
totally.
now.
And I also feel like it's, I think we tend to think everything is all or nothing. Like I'm either like 100% in on this or I'm 100% out on this. And I feel like that really slows people down from joining into movements because it is so overwhelming, all the information that you have to take in at once. But I would just encourage people to not worry about if they're doing it perfectly from the beginning. Just like take one step. And it's the same as like diets and stuff. We have so many weird, like, oh, I'm going to be on a keto diet or I'm on this diet or whatever. But it's like at the end of the day, it's like it's about a long-term lifestyle decision that you've made to participate in the health of your community, right? And so it's about like continuously making an effort. It's okay if you get it wrong sometimes, if you slip up and I have to buy this here today, I'm sorry, I'll try and do better next. It's just not all in necessarily at once. And we can still, over the next couple years, make huge shifts if we're all making an effort in where our money is going and where the power is going. That's my message.
I absolutely agree. I think like it's so important to not focus, like there'll be these social media posts about like one day blackouts of, certain stores and companies and things like that, but that doesn't really move the needle. What moves the needle is making long-term sustainable changes. And so that may start with just shopping less at a certain place, or maybe you have to figure out your, local thrift stores that are really good and, things like that. Like it can take time and it's a process, but as long as you can, commit to it and commit to learning and figuring out what works for you and kind of taking it slow and day by day, I think it's something that's very like achievable.
I think if you actually worked out how much music most people listen to, like I think at most people listen to 300 tracks a month. Like if you went and bought those tracks over 3 years, you would be pretty happy. You'd maybe buy a couple of new records a month. Like how much time do you actually have? And the average consumer doesn't need the infinite jukebox. And I think what we do need is people to save us time. We need humans to create stuff for us. Like we can turn the radio on and listen to a community radio station, or a public radio station, which then gets advertising revenue, which pays the DJs and pays it all creates a ecosystem. And like you, I'm not telling anyone they have to leave Spotify. My friends still send me links to podcasts on Spotify in the group chat, and I'm like, guys, did you listen to my podcast? Did you follow me online? Like but that's not, I'm never going to kick back in the chat and just be like, but moving your podcast off Spotify is a hard thing, and you do have a good video on where to go with that. So would everyone like to tell our audience one thing that you've got coming up, or one place where they can find you, so that people can go off and investigate you and what you do? Do you want to start, Alexa?
So yeah, you can find Cut Off The Spigot. I'm just at Cut Off The Spigot across all major platforms. So Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, YouTube. And then if you want to see all my articles with all my research and links, check out my Substack, which is cutoffthespigot.substack.com.
Laura, do you want to tell people about your tour and your new release?
Okay, you can find me on Instagram at Laura Bird, and I have a new record coming out as Mynabirds that I am self-releasing. I decided also to take back all of my own music, and I'm doing a US tour this fall, and you can find links to all of that through Instagram, through themynabirds.org, or tickets through undertowmusic.com.
Last but not least.
So yeah, I mean, you can find me, Kadhja Bonet. It's very hard to spell.
It will be in the show description.
You can find me on Bandcamp. My EP that just came out like about a month ago is going to also be on Qobuz starting on Thursday. So today. And and I'm also on Substack and Patreon. I'm starting a new channel on these platforms as well. It'll be on called Pop, P-O-P-P exclamation mark, which I've been in communication with Laura and Alexa about, which is going to have all this type of information about how people can throw their own get to know the community parties, advocate for each other parties, co-op parties. I think, yeah, I mean, you didn't even go check it out. So it'll be on Instagram, on Blue Sky, on Substack. And I mean, the work is never done. So definitely come and join in and contribute to everything that we're all building together, because it's a joint effort.
Well, that was quite a lot. I learned a lot, but I think my brain is bubbling, so I'm not going to do a long outro on this episode. Just wanted to say thank you for listening. Thank you for everyone who's been digging into this information with us, people that have been sharing research, people that have been tagging artists, people that have been joining this conversation, because I think it's a really important conversation to have about where we consume music and what that means, who it's for, and how that means something of where we spend our money and our time and our attention. I would love to then do a follow-up on some of these platforms. If you're interested in that, let me know. You can email me, sean@drownedinsound.org, or leave a comment on Drowned in Sound's newsletter, or head to our forums at community.drownedinsound.com. In the Drowned in Sound newsletter, we've got some quite interesting things coming up over the next few weeks, and we will be trying to put some of the information from this podcast into a much more kind of quick-fire, readable resource. We'll also have that on our Instagram account, so if you're not following us over there yet, do that. Subscribe to us on YouTube, do all those things. Hopefully, we will find you some way through the algorithm, which definitely does not want us to be talking about corporate power and all the different things that we cover in this podcast, where we want to live in a better music industry. And our new slogan is Drowned in Sound is surfacing music's power for change. I've been Sean Adams. This has been the Drowned in Sound podcast. Thank you to Josh Craggs for producing this episode. Thank you to my guests for joining me. And thank you for being you. See you next time. Bye.